Officer Branson's hand moved to his weapon as the black woman in the Honda refused to step out. What he didn't know was that her son, watching from 200 yards away, had eliminated terrorist cells in 14 countries. In 8 minutes, this routine traffic stop would become the most watched police encounter in American history. The stories we tell ourselves about threats. The real-life stories that shatter assumptions about danger and power. These touching stories remind us that black stories often hide the most dangerous truths. Life stories that prove that sometimes the person you underestimate is protecting someone who could end you in seconds. Have you ever misjudged someone so completely that it nearly cost you everything? Riverside, North Carolina. Saturday afternoon, 3:47 p.m. The kind of sleepy southern town where everyone knew everyone, except they didn't really know anyone at all. Margaret Thompson, 52, had lived in Riverside for 30 years. She taught second grade at Riverside Elementary, volunteered at the church on Sundays, and had never received so much as a parking ticket in her entire life. Her silver Honda Accord was 11 years old, meticulously maintained, with a Teacher of the Year bumper sticker barely visible beneath the Carolina dust. She was driving home from the grocery store, 2 bags of food in the back seat, when she saw the blue lights in her rearview mirror. Margaret's heart sank. Not from guilt, she knew she hadn't been speeding, hadn't run any lights, hadn't done anything wrong. Her heart sank because she knew what happened to people who looked like her during traffic stops. She'd watched the videos. She'd seen the news. She'd had the conversation with her son dozens of times. Her son. Marcus. If only these officers knew. Margaret pulled over carefully, both hands visible on the steering wheel, exactly as Marcus had taught her. Window already down. License and registration ready on the dashboard. No sudden movements. Stay calm. Stay visible. Stay alive. Officer Dale Branson, 34, approached with his partner, Officer Kyle Hutchins, 28. Branson had been with Riverside PD for 9 years. Hutchins was newer, just 3 years on the force, eager to prove himself, always watching how Branson handled situations. Branson's hand rested on his service weapon as he approached the driver's side. A habit. Just a precaution. That's what he'd tell himself later. License and registration, Branson said, his voice flat, authoritative. No greeting. No explanation for the stop. Margaret kept her hands visible. Officer, may I reach for my documents? They're on the dashboard. Slowly, Branson commanded. Margaret moved with deliberate care, her hands shaking slightly as she retrieved her license and registration. She handed them through the window, making sure Branson could see every movement. Branson examined the documents with exaggerated scrutiny. Margaret Thompson. 52 years old. Riverside address. Everything appeared legitimate, but something felt off to him. He couldn't put his finger on it. Maybe it was the way she was too calm. Too prepared. Like she'd been expecting this. Ma'am, do you know why I pulled you over? Branson asked, that classic line that put the burden of guilt on the driver. No, officer. I wasn't speeding. I used my turn signal. I stopped completely at the intersection. I don't understand. Your taillight is out, Branson lied. He'd pulled her over because she looked suspicious driving through the nice part of town, though he'd never admit that. The taillight excuse was just the justification. My taillight? Margaret's voice carried confusion. Officer, I just had my car serviced last week. Both taillights were working fine. Well, it's out now, Branson said firmly. I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle. This was where things always went wrong. Margaret knew it. Statistics knew it. History knew it. Officer, is that necessary for a taillight? I can get it fixed immediately. Ma'am, I'm not asking. I'm telling you. Step out of the vehicle. Now. 200 yards away, in the parking lot of Riverside Hardware, Marcus Thompson sat in his black Ford F-150, watching the entire scene unfold. Marcus Thompson, 31, looked nothing like a second-grade teacher's son. He was 6 feet 2 inches, 210 pounds of lean muscle, with hands that had been trained to kill in more ways than most people could imagine. His eyes, hidden behind dark sunglasses, tracked every movement the officers made with the kind of precision that came from a decade of operating in the world's most dangerous places. He'd been Delta Force for 8 years. Before that, Army Rangers. Before that, just a kid from Riverside who loved his mama and wanted to serve his country. He had 3 Purple Hearts in a box somewhere, a chest full of medals he never wore, and a service record so classified that most of it would never see daylight. He was home on leave. 2 weeks. The first time he'd been back to Riverside in 18 months. He'd been following his mother from the grocery store, maintaining distance, just checking in on her like he always did when he was home. Old habits from a life lived in threat assessment mode. When he saw the blue lights, his jaw tightened. When his mother pulled over, his hand instinctively moved to his hip, where his sidearm would normally rest. It wasn't there. Civilian life. He had to remind himself. But he was already calculating. Distance to target. Exit routes. Threat assessment. Lines of fire. His brain operated in a language most people would never understand. Marcus grabbed his phone and started recording. Another habit. Document everything. Evidence was the only thing that mattered when the story got told later. Margaret stepped out of her Honda with the careful movements of someone who understood that any sudden gesture could be interpreted as aggression. Her hands were visible. Her posture was non-threatening. She was doing everything right, and she knew it still might not matter. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to search your vehicle," Branson said, already moving toward the car. "Officer, do you have probable cause for a search?" Margaret's voice was steady, but her heart was hammering. Marcus had taught her to know her rights, to ask the right questions, to never consent to searches without legal justification. Branson's eyes narrowed. People who knew their rights were always trouble. "Ma'am, I detected the smell of marijuana coming from your vehicle." "That's not true," Margaret said firmly. "I don't smoke. I don't use drugs. I'm a schoolteacher. You can verify that. Are you refusing to cooperate with a lawful search?" Branson's hand moved closer to his weapon. Hutchins circled around to the passenger side, his own hand on his baton. 2 officers. 1 middle-aged woman. The math should have been simple, but Hutchins had seen how these situations could escalate. People got unpredictable when they felt cornered. "I'm not refusing anything," Margaret said carefully. "I'm asking for clarification of my rights. If you have probable cause, please state it clearly. If you don't, I would prefer not to consent to a search." Marcus's phone was recording everything. His angle wasn't perfect, he was too far away to get clear audio, but the visual was enough. He could see his mother's hands. He could see the officers' postures. He could see this situation sliding toward disaster. He started walking. Not running. Running would attract attention. But walking with purpose, closing the distance, getting into position. Branson was done playing games. "Ma'am, place your hands on the vehicle. You're being detained for obstruction." "Obstruction?" Margaret's voice rose slightly. "I haven't obstructed anything. I answered your questions. I provided my documents. I stepped out of my car. What am I obstructing?" "You're arguing with a lawful order," Branson snapped. "Hands on the vehicle. Now." A small crowd was beginning to gather. Riverside was a small town, and a police stop on Main Street was entertainment. People pulled out their phones. Some were recording. Others were just watching, that mix of curiosity and concern that came from seeing someone else's crisis unfold. Among them was Jennifer Caldwell, 19, a college student home for the weekend. She'd been walking to her car when she noticed the stop. Something about it felt wrong, the officer's aggressive posture, the woman's obvious fear, the escalation over what appeared to be nothing. Jennifer started her own live stream. She didn't have many followers, maybe 200, but that would change in the next hour. "Y'all, I'm watching a traffic stop in Riverside," Jennifer whispered to her phone. "This doesn't look right. The woman hasn't done anything, but the cops are getting aggressive." Comments started appearing immediately. "Record everything. Where is this? Call a lawyer." This is how it starts. Margaret placed her hands on the hood of her car, her mind racing. She'd done nothing wrong. Nothing. And yet here she was, being treated like a criminal, in her own town, on a Saturday afternoon. Marcus was 150 yards away now. Still recording. Still assessing. 3 civilians recording. Good. Multiple angles. Multiple witnesses. The truth would be documented, at least. But documentation didn't stop bullets. Branson began patting down Margaret, his hands rough, invasive, humiliating. "You carrying any weapons? Any drugs? Anything that's going to stick me?" "No, officer," Margaret said, her voice breaking slightly. She thought of her classroom. 23 second graders who called her Miss Thompson and drew her pictures and hugged her legs when they were sad. She thought of the parent-teacher conferences on Monday. She thought of her son, somewhere in the world, fighting for a country that treated his mother like this. If only they knew about Marcus. "Vehicle's clean," Hutchins called out from where he was searching the Honda. "No drugs. No weapons. Nothing." Branson's jaw tightened. He'd been so sure. She'd seemed so suspicious. Black woman, nice car, nervous behavior. The profile fit. Except it didn't fit. Because there was nothing there. Pride wouldn't let him back down. Not in front of his partner. Not in front of the growing crowd. Not when people were recording. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to provide additional identification," Branson said, grasping for control of the situation. "You have my license," Margaret replied, confused. "What additional identification do you need?" "Proof of residence. Proof this vehicle belongs to you. The registration is in your hand, officer. It shows my name and address." Marcus was 100 yards away. He could hear his mother's voice now, that tremor of fear and confusion that broke his heart. He'd faced down Taliban fighters, ISIS terrorists, warlords, and criminals across 3 continents. He'd been shot twice, stabbed once, and blown up more times than he cared to remember. But nothing, compared to the rage he felt watching 2 cops humiliate his mother for the crime of existing. Jennifer's live stream viewer count hit 500. Someone had shared it to a local activism group. More people were tuning in. "This is Margaret Thompson," someone commented. "She teaches at Riverside Elementary. My daughter is in her class." "This is bullshit." Another comment, "I know her. She's literally the nicest person. What are they doing?" The crowd grew. 15 people now. Some filming. Some just watching. The energy was shifting from curiosity to concern to something that might become anger. Branson felt it. That subtle change in the air. He was losing control of the narrative. What had seemed like a routine stop was becoming something else, something public, something that would require explanations. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to sit on the curb while we verify your information," Branson said. "Sit on the curb?" Margaret's voice cracked. "I'm 52 years old. I have done nothing wrong. I gave you my license. I answered your questions. Why are you humiliating me like this? Ma'am, if you don't comply, I will place you in handcuffs for obstruction." Marcus was 75 yards away now. Close enough to intervene if things went physical. Far enough to not be immediately noticed. His body was coiled with tension, every muscle ready to move, his training screaming at him to assess, adapt, overcome. Calm, he told himself. Stay calm. Document. Evidence. Let the system work. But he'd seen too many times when the system didn't work. Margaret slowly lowered herself to the curb, her dignity stripped away, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. In her mind, she was writing the conversation she'd have with her students on Monday. How do you explain to second graders that their teacher was treated like a criminal? How do you teach them about justice and fairness when you just experienced neither? This is wrong, someone in the crowd said loudly. She hasn't done anything. Mind your own business, Hutchins snapped, his hand moving to his baton. It's all our business when you're abusing your authority, another voice called out. Bolder now. The crowd was finding its voice. Jennifer's stream hit 1,000 viewers. Local news accounts were picking it up. The algorithms were doing their work, pushing the content to people who cared about these stories, who'd seen too many stories like this, who were tired of watching history repeat itself. Marcus stopped at 50 yards. Perfect tactical distance. Close enough to intervene. Far enough to not be immediately perceived as a threat. He kept recording, his phone steady despite the fury coursing through his veins. Branson ran Margaret's license again. Clean record. No warrants. Not even a speeding ticket. He was searching for something, anything, that would justify this stop, this search, this humiliation. His radio crackled. Unit 12, be advised. We're receiving multiple calls about your traffic stop. What's your status? Branson keyed his radio. 10-4, dispatch. Traffic stop in progress. Subject is being uncooperative. Margaret's head snapped up. Uncooperative? I've cooperated with everything you've asked. Ma'am, you need to stay quiet, Branson commanded. No, Margaret said, and for the first time, there was steel in her voice. No, I don't need to stay quiet. I have rights. I am a citizen. I am a taxpayer. I am a teacher in this community. And I have done nothing, to justify this treatment. The crowd murmured approval. Phones kept recording. Jennifer's stream was being shared across social media platforms. Local activists were already mobilizing, sending out alerts, preparing to descend on this location. Branson felt the situation slipping away from him completely. He'd made a mistake. He knew it now. But admitting mistake was weakness, and weakness in front of your partner and the public was unacceptable. So he did what too many officers do when they realize they're wrong. He escalated. Ma'am, stand up. You're under arrest. The words landed like a bomb. Arrested? Margaret's voice was pure disbelief. For what? Obstruction of justice. Failure to comply with lawful orders. Resisting arrest. I'm sitting on a curb. Margaret cried out. How am I resisting arrest? Branson moved toward her, his handcuffs already out. Hutchins moved in to assist, and that's when Margaret did something she'd never done in her 52 years of life. She pulled away. Not violently. Not aggressively. She just stepped back, putting distance between herself and the officers, her hands up in a defensive posture. Don't touch me, she said firmly. I haven't done anything wrong. To Branson, that movement was resistance. To Hutchins, it was aggression. To the crowd, it was a woman trying to protect herself. To Marcus, 50 yards away, it was the moment everything changed. Don't fucking touch her, Marcus said, his voice carrying across the street with the kind of authority that made everyone freeze. Every head turned. Every phone refocused. Every witness suddenly became aware that this situation had just added a new variable. Marcus walked forward, his phone still recording, his eyes locked on the officers. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd walked through much worse than two small-town cops having a power trip. Sir, stay back, Branson commanded, his hand moving to his weapon. This doesn't concern you. That's my mother, Marcus said calmly, still walking. So it absolutely concerns me. Jennifer's live stream exploded with comments. Her son just showed up. Oh shit, this is about to get real. Record everything. Someone call a lawyer now. Marcus stopped 10 feet away. Close enough to intervene. Far enough to not be an immediate threat. His body language was relaxed but ready. Anyone with tactical training would recognize the stance, the way his weight was distributed, the positioning of his hands, the angle of his approach. He was a coiled spring pretending to be casual. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back," Branson repeated, his voice less confident now. Something about this man's presence was unsettling. The way he moved. The way he assessed. The complete lack of fear. "I'm standing on a public sidewalk," Marcus said evenly. "I'm not interfering. I'm observing and recording. That's my legal right." "Marcus," Margaret called out, relief and fear mixing in her voice. "Baby, it's okay. Just stay back." But it wasn't okay. Marcus could see the stress in his mother's face, the humiliation in her posture, the tears she was fighting back. He'd seen that look before on the faces of civilians in war zones, innocent people caught in the crossfire of someone else's power trip. "Officers," Marcus said, his voice carrying calm authority, "my mother has cooperated with everything you've asked. What is the probable cause for this stop? What crime is she suspected of committing? What is the legal justification for placing her under arrest?" Those were lawyer questions. Specific. Pointed. Dangerous. Branson felt the situation spiraling. "Sir, final warning. Step back or you'll be arrested for interference." "I'm 10 feet away," Marcus replied. "I'm recording a public servant performing their duties in public. Nothing I'm doing is illegal. But I'm starting to wonder if what you're doing is." The crowd was growing larger. 25 people now. More phones recording. Jennifer's stream had passed 2,000 viewers and was climbing fast. Local news vans were being dispatched. The Riverside Police Department's social media was beginning to light up with angry messages. "What's your badge number?" someone in the crowd called out. "Are you recording this?" another voice added. The questions multiplied, the crowd becoming bolder, the documentation becoming overwhelming. Hutchins whispered to Branson, "Man, we should just let her go. This is getting out of hand." But Branson's pride was fully engaged now. "We're not backing down." Marcus saw the stubbornness in Branson's posture. He'd seen it before in officers who'd rather escalate than admit mistake. It was that pride that turned situations deadly. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice dropping lower, more controlled, "I'm going to give you some professional advice. Whatever you're about to do, think very carefully. Because in about 30 seconds, Sergeant Williams is going to arrive as your supervisor. And when he does, you're going to have to explain why you arrested a 52-year-old schoolteacher for a broken taillight that isn't actually broken." Branson's eyes narrowed. "How do you know?" "Because I called him," Marcus said simply, holding up his phone. "About 2 minutes ago. While you were violating my mother's rights, I was calling your supervisor, the mayor's office, and the ACLU. They're all very interested in this stop." It was a bluff. Partially. Marcus had made calls, but he had no idea if anyone was actually coming. But the confidence in his deliveries sold it completely. Branson's radio crackled. "Unit 12, Sergeant Williams is en route to your location. Hold your position and take no further action until he arrives." Marcus smiled slightly. Not a bluff after all. The crowd murmured. This was getting good. The kind of drama that would be talked about in Riverside for years. Margaret remained on the curb, watching her son with a mix of pride and terror. She knew Marcus was capable of things she couldn't imagine. She knew he'd seen and done things that would give her nightmares. But she also knew that his protective instinct, especially for her, was absolute and potentially dangerous. "Baby, please," she said quietly. "Don't do anything you'll regret." Marcus looked at his mother, his expression softening for just a moment. "Mama, I've done a lot of things I regret. Standing up for you will never be one of them." A police SUV pulled up, lights flashing. Sergeant Thomas Williams, 48, emerged with the expression of a man who already knew this day was about to become a nightmare. He'd been in law enforcement for 22 years, and he'd learned to recognize situations that would end careers. This was one of those situations. "What do we have here?" Williams asked, his voice carrying that particular tone of a supervisor who's about to have a very unpleasant conversation. Branson straightened. "Sergeant, traffic stop for a busted taillight." Subject became uncooperative, displayed suspicious behavior, and refused to comply with lawful orders. Williams walked around Margaret's car, examining the taillights. Both were working perfectly. He'd suspected as much. "Branson," Williams said quietly, "both taillights are functional." "They were out when I initiated the stop," Branson insisted. Williams looked at the crowd, the cameras, the growing number of witnesses. He looked at Margaret, still sitting on the curb with tears in her eyes. He looked at Marcus, standing with the posture of someone who'd been in much worse situations than this. And he made the smart call. "Ma'am," Williams said, addressing Margaret directly, "I apologize for this situation. You're free to go. Your license and registration will be returned immediately." The crowd erupted in approval. Jennifer's stream chat exploded with victory messages. But Branson wasn't done. "Sergeant," she was resisting. She was defending herself from an unlawful stop, Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting across Branson's protest. There was no probable cause. No reasonable suspicion. Just a black woman driving through town, which apparently is still a crime in Riverside. Williams held up his hand. "Sir, I understand your frustration." "Do you?" Marcus stepped forward slightly. "Do you understand what it's like to serve your country for a decade, to put your life on the line repeatedly, only to come home and watch your mother get treated like a criminal for existing?" The words hung in the air. Serve your country. For a decade. That detail registered with Williams, whose own son had done 2 tours in Afghanistan. "You're military," Williams said, "not a question." "I was," Marcus replied. "Now I'm just a son watching his mother get humiliated." Williams looked at Branson and Hutchins. "Get back to the station. We'll discuss this situation in my office. Now." "But Sergeant." "Now, Branson." The 2 officers retreated to their cruiser, their defeat visible in their postures. The crowd cheered their departure. Jennifer's string was being picked up by national news aggregators. The hashtag Riverside traffic stop was already trending locally. Williams approached Margaret, helping her to her feet with genuine respect. "Ma'am, I sincerely apologize. This should never have happened." Margaret accepted his hand, her legs shaky from adrenaline and emotion. "Sergeant Williams, I've lived in this town for 30 years. I've taught hundreds of children. I've never had so much as a parking ticket. And today I was treated like a criminal. I know, ma'am. And there will be consequences for this. You have my word." Marcus stepped closer, his phone still recording. "Consequences like what, Sergeant? A few days off? Some retraining? Or actual accountability?" Williams met his eyes. "That's not for me to decide alone. But this incident will be fully investigated." "By who?" "The department investigating itself?" Marcus's tone was skeptical. "I've seen how that works out." "Son," Williams said, and there was weariness in his voice, "I don't disagree with you. But I'm trying to make this right, within the constraints of what I can actually do." Marcus studied him for a long moment. Combat had taught him to read people quickly, to distinguish between genuine intent and manipulation. Williams seemed sincere, but sincerity didn't always translate to action. "We'll see," Marcus said simply. The crowd began to disperse, satisfied that immediate justice had been served, even if the larger questions remained unanswered. Jennifer ended her live stream, which had peaked at 3,500 viewers, more than 10 times the population of downtown Riverside. Margaret hugged her son tightly, her body shaking with delayed reaction. "Thank you, baby." Marcus wrapped his arms around his mother, feeling how small she seemed despite being the strongest person he'd ever known. "Always, Mama. Always." As they walked back to her car, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not really. The immediate crisis had been diffused, but the underlying problem, the assumptions, the prejudice, the system that enabled this kind of treatment, that was still there, waiting for the next Margaret Thompson to drive through town. What Marcus didn't know yet was that this wouldn't be the last encounter. That Branson's pride and Hutchins's loyalty would create a second confrontation that would force Marcus to reveal exactly who he was and what he was capable of. The first act was over. The real drama was yet to come. When Officer Branson pulled over Margaret Thompson for a broken taillight that wasn't broken, he had no idea her son Marcus was watching. The traffic stop became a viral sensation with 3,500 live viewers. Sergeant Williams diffused the situation. Marcus thought it was over. He was catastrophically wrong. 72 hours later. The Riverside Police Department break room smelled like burnt coffee and wounded pride. Officer Dale Branson sat across from Officer Kyle Hutchins, both men staring at their phones, watching their lives unravel in real time. Jennifer Caldwell's live stream had exploded. What started with 3,500 viewers had been viewed 847,000 times across multiple platforms. National news outlets had picked it up. Civil rights organizations were calling for investigations. The Riverside Police Department's Facebook page had been flooded with over 12,000 angry comments. "This is bullshit," Branson muttered, scrolling through another article titled "Small Town Cops Humiliate Innocent Teacher in Viral Video." "We were doing our jobs." Hutchins looked less certain. "Man, maybe we should have just let it go. Williams suspended us for 3 days. That's going on our permanent records." 3 days paid suspension, Branson corrected. "That's a vacation, not a punishment. They're just trying to calm down the social media mob." But it wasn't just social media. The suspension had come with mandatory retraining, a formal investigation by the county, and the kind of scrutiny that followed officers for the rest of their careers. Every future stop would be examined through the lens of "Aren't you the cops from that viral video?" Branson's phone buzzed. A text from his brother-in-law, who was also on the force in neighboring Pinehurst County. "Dude, you're famous. Not in a good way. My captain asked about you this morning." The humiliation was spreading beyond Riverside. Other departments were watching. Other officers were using this as a case study in what not to do. Branson had become a cautionary tale. "You know what pisses me off most?" Branson said, his voice rising. "That guy. The son. Standing there like he's some kind of hero, lecturing us about rights and accountability. Who the hell does he think he is?" Hutchins shifted uncomfortably. He did seem like he knew what he was talking about. That thing about calling the sergeant, the mayor's office, the ACLU? That was smooth. He was grandstanding, Branson snapped. Showing off for the cameras. Probably thinks he's some kind of activist now. These people love playing the victim. The words hung in the air. These people. The kind of phrase that revealed everything about how Branson saw the world. Hutchins didn't respond. He'd been having doubts. His girlfriend had watched the video and asked him point blank, "Would you want someone treating your mother like that?" He hadn't had a good answer. Branson's phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. "Delta Force veteran's mother targeted in discriminatory traffic stop. Family demands federal investigation." Delta Force veteran? Branson sat up straight, reading the article with growing disbelief. Marcus Thompson, 31, had served 8 years in the Army's most elite Special Operations Unit. 3 Purple Hearts. Multiple classified deployments. The article didn't go into specifics, most of his service record was redacted, but it painted a picture of someone who'd operated at the highest levels of military combat. "Holy shit," Branson whispered. "The son is Delta Force." Hutchins leaned over to read. His face went pale. "Man, we need to leave this alone. These guys are trained to..." "Trained to what?" Branson interrupted, his pride flaring. "Kill people in other countries? This is America." He's a civilian now. His fancy military background doesn't mean shit here. But even as Branson said it, something cold settled in his stomach. He'd heard stories about Delta operators. The kind of men who could end a room full of threats in seconds. The kind of training that never really went away. Hutchins stood up. "I'm done with this, Dale. I'm not getting involved in whatever you're planning." "I'm not planning anything," Branson lied. "I'm just saying we have a right to defend ourselves. Our reputations. Our careers." "Our careers are already damaged," Hutchins said quietly. "Let's not make it worse." But Branson wasn't listening. He was already thinking about how to reclaim his narrative, how to prove that he'd been right all along, how to show that Margaret Thompson and her military son weren't the heroes this story pretended they were. The setup for round 2. Margaret Thompson stood in front of her second-grade class on Wednesday morning, trying to focus on teaching long division when all she could think about was Saturday's humiliation. Her students had been told by their parents. Some looked at her with new awareness. Their teacher had been on the news, had been treated badly by police, had become famous in the worst possible way. "Ms. Thompson?" A small hand went up. Aaliyah Jenkins, 7 years old, with bright eyes and questions that never stopped. "Yes, sweetheart? My daddy said police officers are supposed to protect people. Is that true?" Margaret felt her chest tighten. How do you answer that question when your own experience contradicted it? How do you teach children to trust authority when authority had failed you so completely? "That's what they're supposed to do, yes," Margaret said carefully. "Most police officers work very hard to keep people safe. But sometimes, people make mistakes. Even people in uniform. Did those officers make a mistake with you?" 23 pairs of eyes watched their teacher, waiting for wisdom, waiting for reassurance, waiting for an answer that made sense of a world that often didn't. "Yes, honey. They did. But the important thing is that when people make mistakes, they should learn from them and do better next time." It was the right answer for a 7-year-old. But Margaret didn't believe it herself. She'd seen too many news stories where officers made the same mistakes repeatedly, where the system protected them instead of holding them accountable. Her phone buzzed during lunch break. A text from Marcus, just landed in D.C. Meeting with some people about Saturday. "I'll call you tonight. Love you, Mama." Washington, D.C. Marcus had connections there, relationships built during his military service. Margaret didn't know the specifics. Marcus never talked about his work, but she knew he moved in circles that had power and influence. What she didn't know was that Marcus was meeting with a senator who specialized in police reform, an ACLU attorney who'd handled dozens of civil rights cases, and a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell Margaret's story as part of a larger investigation into traffic stop discrimination. Marcus was building a case. Not just for his mother, but for systemic change. The second encounter. Friday evening, 6:43 p.m. Margaret was driving home from the grocery store, the same route as last Saturday, through the same intersection, in the same car. She'd considered taking a different route, but that felt like letting fear win. This was her town. Her community. She refused to hide. Blue lights in her rearview mirror. Margaret's heart stopped. Not again. Please, not again. But it was. Officer Branson, with Officer Hutchins beside him, pulling her over at almost the exact same spot as before. Margaret pulled over, her hands shaking as she placed them on the steering wheel. She grabbed her phone with one hand, quickly texting Marcus, "They stopped me again. Same officers. I'm scared." The text delivered but showed no response. Marcus was probably still in meetings. Branson approached with the same aggressive posture as before, but this time there was something else in his expression. Vindication. Like he'd been waiting for this opportunity. "License and registration," Branson demanded. "Officer Branson," Margaret said, her voice steadier than she felt, "why are you stopping me?" "I wasn't speeding. I signaled. I stopped completely at the light." You failed to signal when changing lanes 2 blocks back, Branson said. It was a lie, and they both knew it. That's not true. I didn't change lanes. I was in the right lane the entire time. Ma'am, step out of the vehicle. This time, Margaret knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't about traffic violations. This was retaliation. This was Branson trying to prove he had power, trying to reclaim the authority he'd lost in front of cameras and crowds. Am I under arrest? Margaret asked clearly. You will be if you don't comply. Margaret stepped out slowly, her phone already in her hand, starting a voice recording. Officer Branson, I'm recording this interaction. I'm complying with your orders. I want it noted that I'm not resisting in any way. Branson's jaw tightened. Put the phone away. I have a legal right to record police interactions in public. I said put it away. Branson's hand moved to his baton. This time, there was no crowd. No Jennifer with her live stream. No witnesses except Hutchins, who looked increasingly uncomfortable but said nothing. Branson grabbed Margaret's wrist, twisting it to force her to drop the phone. Margaret cried out in pain. You're hurting me. You're resisting arrest, Branson said, his voice cold. He forced her against the car, pulling out handcuffs. Margaret's mind raced with terror and disbelief. This was happening. Again. Worse this time. No witnesses. No protection. Just a 52-year-old teacher being brutalized by a cop with something to prove. What am I being arrested for? Margaret demanded, her voice breaking. Failure to signal. Resisting arrest. Assaulting an officer. Margaret's shoulder popped as Branson twisted her arm harder. You're hurting her, Hutchins protested, pulling out his phone to record. The distraction let Margaret activate her emergency alert, sending her location directly to Marcus. In Washington, D.C., Marcus's phone erupted with alerts. His mother's cries of pain streamed live. He was moving instantly. One call got him a private plane. Another alerted the FBI. A third reached Mayor Patricia Chen. It's happening again. Right now. Margaret sat handcuffed in Branson's patrol car, tears streaming down her face. You cost me my reputation, Branson snarled through the partition. You're going to learn there are consequences. This time, you're going to learn there are consequences for abusing your authority, Mayor Chen's voice cut through as she arrived, recording everything. News vans pulled up behind her. Then came the helicopter. Marcus Thompson arrived like a force of nature, 6'2" of controlled fury. He went straight to his mother. Mama, I'm here. Looking at Branson, Marcus's voice dropped to ice. You have 3 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't end your entire existence. His eyes locked on the officer. I eliminated threats to national security. High-value targets. People much more dangerous than you. Marcus, don't, Margaret whispered. Don't let them make you into something you're not. Federal agents moved in. Officers, you're being detained. Civil rights violations. Assault under color of authority. 3 months later, the Thompson Protocol was implemented across 7 states. Branson served 18 months in federal prison. Margaret testified before Congress. The Marcus Thompson Civil Rights Protection Act became law. She'd been pulled over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. And she'd fixed a broken system that was.